So put your question into the comments and I will respond. We'll hang out for a few minutes and then so I think I'm live streaming. Pretty sure that I'm live streaming. Join test live stream. First, 3 questions posted in chat. Join test live stream. Just hanging out, waiting to see who shows up, if anyone. I've just acquired some new video capability, and seeing if anyone will join, ask a question. Perhaps no one will. Just we shall see. Waiting to see who shows up, if anyone. Just acquired so Rafi asked, what's the difference in temperament between Canadians and Americans? I live in Montreal. I live in Quebec. I've only been here I've been here, I guess, for 7 years. That's kind of shocking to me to consider that. I came here at the end of 2014 and don't really know that many people. I've just been kind of living in my own little bubble, raising my child. Now that she's 8 years old and a little bit more independent, I'm starting to get to know some people here. But I can't say that they're representative of the Canadian temperament. So don't have a great answer. I think the stock answer, of course, is that the Canadians pride themselves on their niceness, and they pride themselves on differentiating themselves, right, from their much more individualistic neighbors to the south, and much more attention-seeking, overweening, and less communitarian neighbors to the south. But I'm not doing anything beyond just repeating the stock cliche. So I don't really know. I find Quebecers who are unrepresentative, right, of the rest of Canada, are very genial people, and the French-speaking ones, and they don't especially love hard work, and they aren't particularly well organized, but they have a certain warmth to them. I don't know if that is the stereotype, but that is my experience of them. Okay, so that's one question I've taken. And this, of course, is a test of my new video and audio setup. And I'll take 2 more questions if 2 more people want to put them into the chat box. Okay, well, doesn't seem that anybody else has anything to ask. Not many people, I guess, are willing to click on the link and go to another site. So perhaps I will test this again, YouTube native, and then we shall see. I don't have I've never done any YouTube broadcasting before, or Twitter native. That's what we'll do. We'll do it on the site itself. Considering the level of the popular child tax credit, would a $600 a month UBI be as popular? For sure. People like free money, and I was, I was present at the beginning of the Andrew Yang campaign, right when it began to take off. soon after his appearance on Joe Rogan. Uh, and I remember posing to him, how does the man who uh, is proposing $1,000 a month defeat the man who proposes $2,000 a month? And he actually was a little bit stumped by that question. And then at some point, he attempted on his website that there would be a constitutional limit on the size of the UBI, because the purpose of it, of course, was not to be so munificent that you would attempt to live off of it, but that it would, of course, enable people to have a floor underneath them and to take risks, start their own business, seek out their highest and best purpose. Glad to see that more questions are coming in. So, of course, the answer to that question is yes. Would you consider writing a piece on Johnny Kim? I don't actually know who that is. So you're saying he's amazing, and it's sad more Americans don't know about him. I am one of those Americans who don't know about him. But I will Google him after this, because I'm always interested in people that at least one person think is amazing. If one person thinks they're amazing, it's possible that they are amazing. Curious if you have anything to say about Michel Houellebecq. Sure. I mean, I'm a fan of Michel Houellebecq. He is a reactionary. That is one of the stock things that one says about him, and people say that about him because it's true. He's a genuine reactionary. But he's an interesting novelist. He writes variations of the same novel into perpetuity, and yet somehow the same plots with the same figures, with the same characters, have a way of continuing to be interesting because he changes up the mise en scene just enough to have his, dyspeptic, right, middle-aged loners, have enough variation in color and circumstance to make it worth rereading the same story again. What's your take on guys like Iglesias or Noah Smith who are very woke skeptical? Well, Iglesias is as unwoke skeptical as you can be, having been driven out of your own company by the company that you founded, right, by a woke meltdown. And of course, it's important not to become, and there's a sense to that, right? Like, it's important not to become an embittered white man, right, who is obsessed with political correctness, particularly after you have been driven out of your own company by political correctness. On the other hand, like, he plays a certain role where he's a credible figure with, figures within the democratic regime, and he is able to, sort of open up a space where by which, we can preserve our understanding that, in fact, math is not racist, right? And we can say this forthrightly, right? So he wrote a piece in Vox, had a headline to the effect of, destructive protest, right, is not the answer. We can say this, right? And so you have these figures whose role is to tell people who would, to reassure them, oh, we can say this, right? And so he has an important role to play, I would say. Do you think there's anything to be optimistic about? Not for the United States of America, actually. After Afghanistan, and now Ukraine, and whatever happens next, we have spent down the inherited capital that was the determining and conditioning factor in the background of my world as I understood it in all the years that I have been a person living in America. We always seem to be shielded from the real consequences of the various follies in which we are engaged. The war in Iraq, right? The the housing crisis, the Trump presidency. Our economy continued to just surge through all of this in spite of itself. But I think we actually are coming to the end of American national global hegemony, and there will be a price. There will be a price that comes with it, and so there's not a lot to be optimistic about. Um, and we're reaching the point where we begin to pose the question to ourselves: to what extent was the greatness of America, and for a long time it truly was a great country, simply the product of consuming the low-hanging fruit of a largely uninhabited North American continent, right? Like that was this powerful and fundamental conditioning factor that we may have actually come to the end to, and in the process, right? Like, because we were so accustomed to consuming, right, and disposing without producing, stabilizing structures. Uh, So earlier today, I posted a graph showing white American birth rates nosediving and then crossing over with surging white American death rates. So something happened to a generation that happens throughout the world wherever we make the transition to a post-industrial economy. People's priorities and their values change, and they head to a demographic transition, and they move expeditiously toward depopulation. And in about 1.5 generations, we reach a point where the women in possession of the wombs that could reverse this tendency were themselves not born. But my point with the tweet was, on the one hand, okay, so this happens. This was not unique to white Americans. This happened throughout East Asia, even more rapidly, in fact, and of course throughout Europe. I have to look at the data. It doesn't seem to be that there is the same surge in deaths, and so it's just speculation. But there's a question as to whether, well, why did the death spikes to such a degree? And I think it does have to do with the change in priorities and values that are responsible for the decline in births. Also left a lot of white American baby boomers in despair as they entered late middle age. And of course, that's the place where we are seeing the rise in mortality rates driven by what we call deaths of despair, people drinking themselves to death, people overdosing on opiates. I think it was maybe 2015 or 2016 where we first saw the opiate overdoses overtake deaths from auto accidents as the number one cause of mortality in America. And so, that's a product of loneliness, and that's a product of people who neglected to secure themselves against failure and hardship in their youth, because of where their values and their priorities had made them choose how to live their life, and subsequent wreckage. Okay, let's see. Navy SEAL, son of immigrants, dad was a drunk who beat him. Is that Kim? Okay, I'll check him out. I like the Twitter bot that reports on private jet flights, since it's a high CO2e emitting activity enjoyed primarily by the ultra wealthy. Easy way to predict carbon tax revenue from individuals. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I'm not familiar with that bot, but I'll check it out. Could you talk about your original book project? Sure, I can. I was given a handsome book deal after a piece I published about Asian Americans in New York Magazine. There was a sense, which was an early kind of viral online news reporting piece at the time. It was the most heavily trafficked article in the history of the publication. I think it's been surpassed since then. Um, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew that there was money available, and so I slapped together something, and it wasn't really totally coherent or fully filled out. I did do some reporting on a miscellaneous group of Asian American men, including Tony Hsieh and Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang was not who he would later come to be, but he was, an interesting figure who seemed like he might become something at some time in the future. And then Tony Hsieh was someone who, of course, had become something, and was attempting various experiments in living, the outcome of which would only become clear in 2021, when he sort of when he burned himself to death, right? Like in a locked room at the end of a long period of dissipation and right, like partying while surrounded by groups of ever younger sycophants. So a sad story, and I think maybe at some point, but there wasn't enough of a story really to like have a narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, and I couldn't quite pull it off. And then also, like, I encountered some difficulties in my own personal life that ended up kind of making it a lost decade for me, from which I have not entirely recovered. Um, what's going on in Trump's head? Trump is, he's really easily modelable, all right? He's one of the most easily model, he will always, like just a simple kind of, masculine dominance algorithm. And, but, he's actually a coward, right? Like, and so, he will always bluster maximally. He will never follow through, right? And in fact, there's nothing he actually wants to do with power, and so he has the kind of tyrannical. He has the tyrannical impulse, but he does not have an actual will to power, because all he has ever wanted to do, right, was to have the spotlight on himself. And so a very dysfunctional pathological codependency came into existence at the scale of the nation, right? Like from the years 2016 all the way into the present, right? Where various, various incompetent elites found there was a way to, launder their moral reputation by opposing him and by setting on fire, right? Like various, protocols of impartiality and, that are constitutive of professional competence in the fields of journalism, of governance, of politics, of law. And so that's the kind of vice in which we found ourselves stuck in those years, and we will see whether or not death, because the man is very old and he's very unhealthy, deliver us from a continuation of this very dysfunctional codependency between America's elites. And of course, when I say that, I merely refer to those who occupy certain positions within what I call the vertically integrated messaging apparatus. Not elites in the sense of being competent or skilled people, but elites in the sense of having an ascribed position whereby they are, they're empowered to dictate terms to other people, despite, right, like not having any competence. Anyway, those people, right, have been in a pathological and dysfunctional codependency with this person that has burned down, right, and burned down many institutions and still has running room. If we are not delivered from that eventuality by his, it wouldn't even be premature. His right on time death from natural causes. Um, do you agree with your what Tulsi Gabbard, my wife Gabbard, opinion that the invasion of no, I don't. I do agree that it was probably a mistake to continue to extend NATO to Putin's door. Is that the whole of her analysis? Uh, um, but there's a lot of, there are many, there are many intervening steps between the time where we attempted that and where we ended up now. So I wouldn't call it the ultimate cause. I would say that it was an unwise thing to do at the time. But Putin is invading Ukraine. He has his own agency. It's not anybody else's fault. Um, okay. So, any other questions? Okay, guys. Thanks for stopping in. And perhaps I'll do this again sometime. Not really sure, but I may. Do you feel at home in this age, or do you feel at all untimely? Well, clearly I am untimely, but I have made an adjustment. I got onto Twitter, and it became a somewhat disturbingly large part of my written output, and but I've become habituated to it, and it's actually given me much of what I have. Right, so the thing that burned down the world that I knew, also gave back, and gave back, some very very equivocal blessings on the one hand, but also some very unequivocal blessings. So I have networked, with other people of like mind through it, and then of course now I am moving to expand the scope of my own mini vertical micro maybe or nano vertical vertically integrated messaging apparatus, my own little stack, and so I'm going from text and from tweets to audio, and I'm already on the Callin app. Now making some forays into video, and acquiring the skill to do spontaneous, extemporaneous speaking. Um, and of course, what I still have to do is learn how to not do a lot of filler words, which I do. Um, and I feel that this is a skill that can be acquired over time. So many, so many, people, so many former NFL players who have, who've been sacked, hundreds of times and been concussed many times, seem to be able to acquire the ability to do this. So why not me? Okay. Do you think Zoomers will inevitably woke when they grow older? Like it is already a foregone conclusion that successor ideology takes over via demographics? Yeah, I think that's pretty much baked into the cake. There's polls saying that Zoomers actually dislike cancel culture more than other cohorts do. But cancel culture, like political correctness, is by definition a reference to what people regard as the excesses of a movement. And I think the Zoomers are the leading edge of a group that simply takes as axiomatic many of the many of the axioms of and do not question and do not conceive of the possibility of questioning, right? Like gender fluidity or whatever it is that is constitutive of successor ideology. Um, so, I call it the astroturfed pseudo-morality. The astroturfed pseudo-morality is all of morality that a rising cohort of people know. And so that's just going to be the new baseline. And, the various, the various insanities and frenzies that will come about as a result of installing, right, like deeply dysfunctional and pathological, um, falsehoods, right, at like the very basis level, the very basic level of the operating system of the collective and individual mind. They will play out, and we will come to understand how the colorful insanity that we read about when we revisit the annals of ancient Rome in its decadent phase, right? Like how it came to be. And of course, in many respects, we are already there, but no matter how far along you are, it always turns out that there is a new nadir, and I think that the rest of our lives will be consumed with finding new nadirs. What can we say to our kids about the trajectory of the economy and culture without dragging them down into this whole hyper online doomer thing? Well, I'm gonna reverse what I have to say a little bit. I just gave a talk to a bunch of students in a graduate program in cultural reporting at NYU, and they had all read my work, and so I talked about all the same stuff that I talk about on Twitter, and these are people in their early 20s who aspire to be writers and journalists, and they all loved my essay, and they were all rapt, with what I listened raptly to what I had to say, and so it means that there are young people who are thinking for themselves, and there are young people who have somehow, right, uploaded functional, reasonable operating systems. So the battle is never wholly lost. Should Asian males be black pilled or white pilled? Well, I don't really know. I always hear about young women who love Asian men because of K-drama and K-pop, and I'm sure that exists. It's a phenomenon to some degree. So white pilled or what, or black pilled in what sense, right? Like in the end we're all individuals, and we can it's up to us to make our own. It's up to us to make our own fate, even in light of whatever conditioning factors, right? Like are imposed upon us. Let's see. Any other questions? Should I do this again? Should I do it on YouTube or should I do it on Twitter? And is there a reason to interact with someone on video, just a dude talking rather than audio? I think it does add a certain dimension. Okay, I will stop the stream. I'm glad I was able to make it work, and thanks for all the questions.